Well, let us look at complex numbers. In complex numbers, we always deal with negative numbers, where in the root sign you may be asked to find the square root of a negative. But basically, we have to let I be the square root of negative 1. That is how it is done. So the square root of negative 1, it is I. And the explanation here is being where I is a complex or imaginary number. So we call it complex number because it is an imaginary number. It's a number which is not real. It's a number that we assume that it is there. Like negative 1, we assume it is there, but since it is a negative, then it is not there in reality. It is just imagined to be there. So in complex number, we know that the square root of negative 1 is equals to I. And this one is the example. We have many examples. After this example, you search for example 2, you search for example 3 like that. So we are beginning with example 1. In our example 1, we are to find the square root of the following. Part A, we are asked to find the square root of negative 4. In our solution here, we begin by putting the root sign to represent what has been given in the question, which is root of negative 4. So root of negative 4 is the same as root of, then now we have to find negative 1 multiplied by what, which we can get negative 4. So we have to factorize this. Like this one here, negative 4 is the same as negative 4 times. Negative 4 is the same as 4 times negative 1. So instead of maintaining negative 4, to make it easier, we put negative 1 separately. Since negative 1, the complex number is I, we know. So by doing that, it makes our work easy. So here we have the square root of 4 times negative 1, which here is the same as square root of 4 times square root of negative 1. But square root of negative 1 is equals to I. So which means we can get the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2. And the square root of negative 1 is what? Is I. So 2 times I we get 2I. So this is the square root of negative 4. That is for example 1, part A. So let us go to part B. In our part B, we are to find the square root of negative 9. So whenever you see a negative here, just know that you are going to find the square root of that number multiplied by negative 1. Which will be a factor, which when you multiply them, you get back here. So now in this one, we are to get the square root of negative 9. Here, we begin by writing the solution, then we come to the real work, which is the square root of negative 9 is the same as the square root of 9 times negative 1. All of them should be in the root because we are trying to separate them. Now that in this step, the square root of 9 times the square root of negative 1, if all of them are in the root, we can separate them with different roots, as shown in this part under it. So here we are going to write square root of 9 multiplied by the square root of negative 1. But the square root of negative 1 is I. So which means the square root of negative 1, we are going to write I in the next step. And the square root of 9 here, we are going to write 3 because the square root of 9 is 3. You can press from a calculator. Or you can use any other method. You can use a method used in primary, which is the very simple one. So here, the square root of 9 is 3, the square root of negative 1 is I. So 3 times I, we get 3I. That is that. So let us go to part C. In part C here, we are to find the square root of negative 64. So in our solution, we begin by writing the square root of negative 64, and we begin the work now. So square root of 64, square root of negative 64 is equal to the square root of 64 times the square root of negative 1. Because we know when we multiply negative 1 by 64, we get back to negative 64. So in other words, we just factorize it. We separate negative 1 to be standing alone. Now in the next step, we we make this one to have different roots. Like this one, 64 should have its own root, then -1 should also have its own root. So that we go ahead and say, but -1, the square root of -1 is equals to I. So when we come here, square root of 64, it is 8. Square root of -1, it is I. So that here we have 8 times I, we get 8I. So with that out, that is how we go about with them. So we have here some exercise that you should also try. So exercise is saying find the following. So you find the square root of 16. In this one, you just put square root of 16 times -1 and you follow the way I've been doing. So you can try also this one, the square root of 25, also find the square root of -49, also find the square root of -100, also find the square root of -400, and very many complex ones. So that is how it is supposed to be. So that is that. Don't forget to subscribe. You like our page also, press like and you send us a message. Thank you.